Hello. Today I am in my matching, I don't know what this would be, olive? My matching, my matching top and bottom shirt. And I've got my Saturn necklace, just because it's like alien-y. Sean the Book Maniac tagged me in the supermarket book tag, so I wanted to come in and do this because he reminded me I need to do the video. Yeah, and personally I find the title of this video really triggering.
I get dressed in the morning, I'm triggered. I take a shower, I'm triggered. I get in the car, I'm triggered.
Because I used to work in a supermarket. I've mentioned this before in a video, I think, but I used to work at Sainsbury's, which is a British supermarket chain, and when I worked there, I would always take books with me, and I would even read them at the back of the counters where I worked. I would also get coffee from the Sainsbury's cafe while I was like on shift, walk off to the cafe, come back with a coffee, hide it out the back, because you weren't allowed like food and drink because I'm in a food and drink preparation area. But I would do it anyway. I wouldn't actually have the coffee cup like where I prepared any of the food, because there was like a back area which was just like files and stuff. But I would eat the pizzas there, which I wasn't allowed to do. Like, once they fired someone because they caught him reducing the price of pizzas, but I wouldn't even buy them. Like, I would, if I was hungry because I hadn't eaten all day, I would be on pizzas sometimes, and I would literally sometimes when someone was on the break make myself a pizza, like a little one, and then stash it out the back and eat it. And once one of the like step-in substitute managers, she was, and I would put it in the box and I would slip it underneath the like the cabinet where they had the files on there. So you might be able to smell a pizza, but you wouldn't know where it was. And she was back there for like 10 minutes, and I was literally out the front shitting myself, thinking, has she found the pizza? Am I dead? Am I fired? And then she came out like nonplussed, like she didn't know. And then when I went in there, it was still under there and it was still warm. And I do not miss those days. What else? I would also eat the vegetable samosas, even though I'd have been fired if they caught me. Sainsbury's story times. But I'm so glad I don't work there anymore. Literally every day I'm like, I'm so glad I don't work in these terrible jobs I used to have to do. But anyway, that aside, the supermarket book tag isn't actually about supermarkets. It's just like bookish questions based on supermarkets. So I've got my list of them. Number one, before going shopping, do you have a list? Yes, I do. Well, normally I do. Let me just... I mean, sometimes when I go book shopping, I just like to do it impromptu and go in there and see what grabs my eye, which is how I discovered Bonjour Tristesse. If you've not read this, I did a video on this. I picked this out just because I saw it like that and was like, oh, this looks interesting. And then when I read it, I absolutely loved it. And it's probably been one of my favourite reads so far this year. But generally, I have a list. So lists, because I'm quite an impulsive person. I love buying books, and I think if I didn't have a list, I would honestly, like, when someone mentioned a book, I'd be like adding it, like buying it, and I can't afford to do that. And I find that if I didn't make a list, I would be like, I know I've got all these books I want to buy, and it's driving me insane because I really want to read them and I can't, and I'm going to forget them. So I make a list, and before I started BookTube, a list like this was just enough, but you can kind of see how many books I have on the list. It must be like at least 100. But I've got other things I want, and then when I buy them, I can tick them off. So that's always very satisfying. So this is my list of stuff I want, DVDs, books, and then I have this other list for more books. I have my Royal Proclamations book list, to-do list, basically, and then on the back, I normally write what I'm going to buy. So I've not bought anything today, so I've got my notes for this, the tag questions on the back. Sometimes I go in and I might have a list of like 1 or 2 books, and then I let myself browse and discover some other books. But sometimes I just go in without a list. I'm not that anal about it. But yeah, I love having a list of books to help keep me sane. Right, next question. Fruit and Veg, recommend a book that improved your physical mental health. Next question. I mean, reading I generally do for my mental health. 3. Tinned goods. What's your tin can genre? Regardless of the label on the can, the contents are more than often bland. So a genre that basically is shit. YA. This is an example of YA. I mean, this is quite a nice edition. This is the only reason I bought the book. I mean, this was okay, actually. The first 100 pages, I was like, okay. But it was not that great. Generally, I don't like YA. I mean, like, original YA, I like The Catcher in the Rye, one of my favourites. So YA can be really good, but generally not good. Like, generally, the characterisation is shit. The plot is shit. The themes are shit. The tropes are shit. Sometimes they are decent books. The Fault in Our Stars, like, that's okay. Number 4, for meat and fish counter. Now, this is particularly triggering because I used to work next to the meat and fish counter, and sometimes I would even have to work on the meat and fish counter because they were so understaffed. And there was a guy called Daryl who worked on the meat and fish counter, and he was a vegetarian. And I remember telling him distinctly, like, what did he have? He had a degree in psychology, and I was telling him, Daryl, you need to do something for your life. Like, you need to do an MA or do something. And he would always be like, oh, I'm thinking of doing an MA. And I was like, Daryl, you're a vegetarian and you work on a meat and fish counter. Like, your life is depressing enough. You need to do something. But I wouldn't just go up to him and say that. Like, that would be really rude. But he would always be like, I need to do stuff with my life, Ed. And I'd be like, you do, Daryl. And I was like, you can change if you like. You can come on the ham section and like the samosa section, and I'll do meat and fish, because if you were meat and fish, you get barely any customers, so you'd have to do barely any work. And he was like, no, I love not doing any work. So it was only ever when I was on meat and fish that I would get to read, because you wouldn't have to serve customers. So a book you felt was meant just for you. I'm kind of skipping this question because I'm not so narcissistic that I would ever read a book and just think, oh, it's meant just for me. Because, books, they're written for the public, anyone to read. But then I guess as a writer, when I write stuff, that's more me. Like, it's kind of me, but it's like writing for someone else, because you have to write for like an imagined audience. So, but yeah, I guess it's more that when I read my own writing, I see myself in that. So I don't really go to books expecting to see myself in them. 5. Baked goods. Bread's a staple. Who's an author you can digest at any time of the day? And for this, I would have to say Muriel Spark, who is one of my favourite authors. I'm probably going to do a video on her at some point, because she is one of my favourite authors. I could pick up a Muriel Spark novel any time of the day and adore her. Yeah, The Comforters, that was her first novel, brilliant. Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, one of my favourite novels of all time. The Public Image, brilliant, sassy. Loitering with Intent, ace. A Far Cry from Kensington. Anyone who believes that because you're into literature, oh my god, I would love to work in the publishing industry because I love books. Read this book and you will learn that actually there's all sorts of pursuit de copies in the publishing industry that you want to avoid with a barge pole. So yes, I adore Muriel Spark. 6. The chilled section. A cool new author you can digest. And I would have to say Jessica Andrews, who wrote Saltwater, also did a video on this. But this is her debut. It was first-person perspective about a mother-daughter relationship, and the girl goes off to uni in London, and then she's the party girl. But the writing is really, really beautiful. 7. A Spillage in the Frozen section. A book that gave you the shivers. As a child, I remember reading The Goblet of Fire and the first scene in the Riddle House. I remember reading it when I was maybe 7 years old, reading it and terrified in my room reading it. And like, oh my god, there's a snake. It's killing the old man. Ugh. But as an adult or teenager, I remember reading 1984, and there's a particular scene where the main guy gets, like, they put a cage of starved rats on his head, and when I read that bit, I was like, oh!
Triggered.
And now I kind of have a mild phobia of rats, and I think it was aggravated even more when I had mice in my flat when I lived by the Sainsbury's in Fallowfield that I worked in. Now I don't live there anymore, so I don't have mice. Ugh, but it was disgusting. And I will even insert a footage of the mice because I still have them on my phone.
Triggered.
Ugh, disgusting.
Next.
Adult Only, the Beers, Wine and Spirits Aisle, a book that made you feel like an adult. Now for this, I would have to say that when I was a child, my mum used to take me to the library, and I only liked the kids area because the Caldecott Library had like a fire engine thing that like you could sit on and stuff. So I would only go to the fire engine and then I'd be like, all these books look shit. I'm going to the adult section because the adult section was huge. So I would go down the adult fiction and my mum would let me pick out historical fiction. So I would have to say that this book made me feel like an adult. I remember reading this when I was maybe 9 years old and loving it because these books are just filthy. They're kind of like Mills and Boon but historical. And I remember devouring Philippa Goki books and showing them to my friends, like, look at this, look at the filth in this book. My mum let me get this book out from the library on her account. But then my mum would be like, oh, Ed, should I read it? And I'd be like, no, mum, you wouldn't understand it. It's historical. Um, but yeah, I remember when my mum took me to see the movie they made of this with Eric Barner, who is a fit young Henry VIII. I like all the sex in it. And then I was like, Mum, this wasn't in the book. But yeah, as a child, I loved this. And I think this is probably why I get on so well with the Cromwell trilogy that I'm reading at the moment, because I know all the characters, more or less. And number 9, Sweet Isle. What genre is your indulgence? For this, I would probably have to say dystopian fiction, like good dystopian fiction. So I've picked one example would be Never Let Me Go. And I think there's just a sense of loss and isolation in dystopian fiction that I really gel with when it's done well. Number 10, At the Checkout.
Is that for here or to go?
Tag some booktubers or some shoppers. So I am tagging Courtney Reads, GK Reads, Reading and Retail, because retail is in her name. Of course she needs to do this tag. And I'm also going to tag Ivan's Nightmare is one of his aliases. He's recently been doing videos on Moby Dick, and his discussions on Moby Dick are so good. Like, I would honestly gladly go to lectures on Moby Dick that he was giving. And he also recently did a video talking about when he went sailing with his wife. So he's a married man, but he's also very handsome. So check him out. Yeah, that is my supermarket book tag. Thank you for watching, and feel free to do this tag as well if you haven't done it already. Bye.